One decision, one mistake, one train she was never meant to take. Amara Chukwuemeka had everything: money, fame, and the kind of luxury most people only dream about. But the night she missed her driver and stepped onto a crowded Lagos train, her life spun into a world she had never known. A world of secrets, betrayal, love, and choices that would cost her everything. She thought it was just the wrong train, but it was the beginning of the journey that changed her destiny forever. This is the story of how a billionaire heiress disappeared into the streets and returned with a new life no one ever saw coming. The story did not begin with poverty, nor with struggle. It began with too much of everything. Too much money, too much fame, too much power, wrapped around the life of Amara Chukwuemeka, heiress to one of Africa's most powerful fintech empires. She lived in a glass and steel penthouse, high above Victoria Island, Lagos, where every wall opened to the Atlantic breeze, and every night was lit by neon reflections bouncing off the ocean waves. Her mornings were chauffeured in bulletproof electric cars, her afternoons filled with strategy meetings at Chukwuemeka Technologies, and her evenings, cocktail dresses, champagne, and curated smiles in front of flashing cameras. She was the poster child of wealth in a nation where most only dreamed of it. But wealth has a way of creating prisons made of gold, and Amara, though adored by the media, had grown weary of it all. Her role as creative director in her father's futuristic fashion fintech venture meant endless pressure, designing luxury that sold dreams, maintaining an image that never cracked. Behind her immaculate public mask was a loneliness she dared not admit. She had the world at her feet, but sometimes, when the noise of the city softened, she would catch herself whispering, "What if this isn't the life I was meant to live?" On that fateful evening, the whisper turned into action. Amara had just finished delivering a keynote speech at a tech conference on Lagos Island. Dressed in a flowing silver gown stitched with embedded digital patterns that lit up as she moved, she looked like the embodiment of the future itself. Cameras followed her, journalists scribbled, and her father's investors smiled with approval. But outside, when she walked into the humid Lagos night, her driver was nowhere to be found. The sleek Rolls-Royce was delayed in traffic, trapped somewhere on Ozumba Mbadiwe Road. For once, Amara stood alone, unescorted, watching the bustling street swirl with commuters. Her eyes drifted to the train station across the road. It was not her world, not the place for billionaires in shimmering gowns. Yet, something inside her ached for the ordinary, for noise without filters, for faces without hidden agendas. Almost impulsively, she stepped forward, her heels clicking against the pavement, and walked toward the station. The contrast was instant, like stepping from heaven into chaos. The neon glow of luxury towers faded behind her as she descended into the train platform. Heat wrapped around her like a suffocating blanket. The air smelled of sweat, engine oil, and roasted peanuts from nearby hawkers. Workers in dusty uniforms, mothers with restless children, and street vendors jostled for space. And there she was, an heiress worth billions, lost among them, her silver gown brushing against rough concrete. When the train arrived, Amara stepped inside. The doors slammed behind her with a metallic thud, sealing her decision. Inside, the train was packed. The overhead fans whirred weakly, pushing hot air around. People muttered, laughed, argued, some staring at the strange figure who clearly didn't belong. Her diamond bracelet caught the dim light. Her designer bag clutched tightly to her chest. For the first time in her life, she felt eyes that didn't admire her. They judged, questioned, or dismissed her. Among those eyes was Tunde Olawale. He was a young AI engineer, his backpack filled with half-finished designs for an energy prototype. He noticed her, not just because of her gown, but because of the fear in her eyes. Fear she tried desperately to mask. Something about her presence unsettled him, yet intrigued him. As the train roared forward, the city lights outside flickered past in streaks of gold and red. Then, without warning, the train jolted violently. Sparks crackled overhead, and the car shuddered to a stop in the middle of a dark industrial district. People groaned, cursed, and shouted in frustration. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. In the chaos, Amara stumbled. Her designer phone slipped from her hand and disappeared into the crowd. Panic surged through her chest. That phone was her lifeline, her contact with her world, her shield of wealth, her proof of identity. Now it was gone. She looked around, her heart pounding, realizing that no one here cared who she was. For the first time, she was just another passenger, another face in the dark. She tried to steady her breathing. In the shadows, the reality hit her. Alone, disconnected, unrecognizable. She had never been so vulnerable. Tunde caught sight of her struggling, but before he could move closer, the train doors creaked open. With no explanation, passengers began spilling out into the night. Amara hesitated, her heels sinking into the rough ground as she followed the crowd. And then it happened. She stepped off the platform into a station she did not know, surrounded by warehouses, flickering streetlights, and the faint hum of faraway generators. The world here was raw, industrial, and mercilessly unfamiliar. She wrapped her arms around herself, her gown now dust-stained, her eyes wide with unease. Somewhere deep inside, her heart whispered words she would never forget. The wrong train was the one her destiny had been waiting for. Amara turned her head, searching for direction, but all she found was darkness stretching in every path. Slowly, she took a step forward, then another. And as the train behind her screeched back to life and roared away, Amara Chukwuemeka, the billionaire heiress, vanished into the night, alone in a place that was never meant to know her name. The night carried Amara deeper than she had ever gone, into streets her world had trained her to avoid. The train was gone now, leaving behind the metallic echo of its departure, and she stood alone in an industrial estate near Surulere, a place of shadows, flickering bulbs, and restless life. Diesel smoke from passing trucks mixed with the smell of roasted corn and fried plantain. Hawkers shouted prices into the thick air, children darted between bodies, and loud generators hummed their endless song against the silence of PHCN's absence. Amara's gown glimmered faintly under weak streetlights, making her stand out like a silver beacon among rusted zinc roofs and peeling paint. She quickly pulled the shawl from her bag and draped it over herself, hoping to dim her shine, to blend in where she had never belonged. She walked carefully, her heart racing at every voice raised, every glance that lingered too long. The heiress who once graced the cover of international magazines now moved like a fugitive in her own city. She pressed forward into a night market alive with chaos. Men grilled suya on open flames, the meat hissing as pepper smoke filled the air. Women fried puff-puff in giant pans, scooping golden balls into nylon bags for waiting customers. Traders spread second-hand clothes on the ground, calling out, "Bend down, select," with laughter that cut through the exhaustion of the day. Music blared from a scratchy speaker, Afro-beat rhythms colliding with street noise. Amara's eyes widened. This was Lagos, but not the Lagos she had ever known. She clutched her bag tightly, fighting the urge to turn back. And then she heard a voice. "Madam, you again?" She turned and found herself staring into the eyes of Tunde Olawale, the same young man from the train. His jeans were faded, his shirt loose, his backpack heavy on his shoulders. His expression carried a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "You don't belong here," he said, his tone low, more observation than insult. "I could say the same about you," Amara replied softly, though her voice trembled. Tunde tilted his head, studying her. Something about her didn't add up. Her accent was too polished, her skin too carefully cared for, her discomfort too obvious. Yet there was vulnerability in her eyes that made him hold back judgment. "You'll get eaten alive in these streets," he muttered, but then sighed. "Come on, walk with me." Reluctantly, she followed him. The rough ground beneath her feet punished her expensive heels. Each step scraped leather, until finally, the inevitable happened. The right heel snapped, sending her stumbling forward. Gasps of laughter rose from a group of boys nearby. Amara froze, her face burning with humiliation. Tunde bent down, picked up the broken heel, and shook his head with a half-smile. Luxury doesn't survive Lagos streets, he teased gently. Wait here. He disappeared into the crowd, then returned minutes later, holding a pair of cheap plastic slippers. He dropped them at her feet. Try these. They're not Dior, but they'll carry you farther. Amara hesitated, then slowly slipped off her designer shoes and stepped into the slippers. The rubber bit into her skin, unfamiliar and awkward, yet strangely liberating. She laughed lightly, shaking her head. This is insane, she whispered. Welcome to our madness, Tunde replied. As they walked further, Tunde stopped at a suya stand. The vendor sprinkled yaji spice on sizzling beef skewers, the scent irresistible. He bought 2 sticks and handed one to Amara. She looked at it, horrified. I can't eat that. Why not? I don't eat street food. Then tonight, you will. He tore a piece with his teeth, chewed, and gestured for her to try. Slowly she raised it to her lips. The spice hit her tongue, sharp and smoky, the meat tender in a way she'd never tasted. Her eyes widened in shock. This is actually amazing. Tunde grinned. Told you. Suya doesn't care how much money you have. It just feeds you. Later, they bought puff puff, wrapped in old newspapers. Amara bit into the soft, sugary ball, and for the first time in years, laughed without restraint. Everywhere she looked, she saw resilience. Shops powered by generators flickered back to life, despite the blackout. Children played football with a plastic bottle, laughing like millionaires. Women haggled with unbreakable spirit. In these streets of grit and noise, Amara saw something her golden cage had denied her: raw humanity. Tunde led her up the staircase of an old building onto a rooftop overlooking the city. From there, Lagos stretched in 2 worlds. To one side, the glowing skyscrapers of Victoria Island gleamed, symbols of wealth and privilege. To the other, endless neighborhoods pulsed with smoky chaos, a universe powered by sweat and stubborn hope. Amara stood in silence, the night wind tangling her hair, her heart caught between fear and exhilaration. This is Lagos, Tunde said beside her. Both sides are real, but only one teaches you how to live. Amara turned to him, her eyes softening. He looked back at her, sensing she was different, though he could not yet place why. For a moment, words dissolved, replaced by the strange electricity of 2 worlds colliding. Then, a shout from the street below broke the spell. 2 young men held up their phones, pointing toward the rooftop. One of them grinned wickedly. "Na she be this, the billionaire girl we chop puff puff." Amara froze, her heart sinking. Camera flashes lit the night, freezing her image forever. By morning, the world would know. Amara Chukwuemeka, the untouchable heiress, had been caught in Surulere eating puff puff. Banana Island glittered that night as if trying to outshine the Atlantic Ocean itself. Mansions rose like glass castles, their windows spilling golden light into the dark lagoon. Inside one of the largest villas on the island, the Chukwuemeka residence, panic simmered behind polished marble walls. The villa was an architectural wonder. High ceilings adorned with golden chandeliers imported from Italy, an infinity pool stretching into the horizon, automated security gates that opened only to the family's coded fingerprints. Every corner was a showcase of wealth: Persian rugs, rare sculptures, smart glass walls that adjusted tint with a clap. Yet on this night, for all its grandeur, the house felt like a hollow shell. Its heartbeat was missing. Amara was gone. Chief Obinna Chukwuemeka sat stiffly in the grand living room, his fingers drumming the mahogany armrest of a chair that cost more than most Nigerians' lifetime earnings. He was a man used to control, to bending circumstances to his will, to buying silence with money. But tonight, the empire he had built felt fragile. In 3 days, he was set to finalize a billion-naira merger with European investors, an agreement that would expand his fintech empire across 3 continents. The deal was his crowning glory, the key to solidifying his legacy. And now, his daughter's disappearance threatened to undo it all. "She should have been home hours ago," Obina muttered, his voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. His eyes, normally cold and calculating, flickered with the faintest shade of worry. Across from him sat Adaora, his wife, draped in an emerald silk wrapper. Her posture was as flawless as her diamond necklace. But where Obina's worry leaked through, Adaora's eyes carried only irritation. She was not the type of woman to be shaken by absence or panic. She was a woman who measured everything in optics, appearances, reputation, what society whispered behind manicured fingers. "Obina, this is your fault," Adaora said, her tone clipped, her voice void of softness. "You gave her too much freedom. You allowed her to play at being independent. And now look, she has embarrassed us." Obina's jaw tightened. "Embarrassed us? My only daughter is missing, Adaora." Adaora lifted a hand, dismissive. "She is not missing. She is reckless. There's a difference." Her words pierced the silence like broken glass. The housemaids, lingering in the hallway, exchanged nervous glances. The kitchen staff whispered in Igbo, their voices trembling. Some feared Amara had been kidnapped. Others whispered she had run away. The night was heavy with speculation. Then the news came. Obina's assistant, sweating despite the air conditioning, hurried into the room carrying a tablet. He placed it carefully on the marble table. "Sir, Madam, you need to see this." The screen displayed a breaking headline. "Billionaire heiress caught in Surulere, eating puff-puff among locals." Beneath it, grainy photographs flashed. Amara in cheap slippers, her shawl covering her silver gown, a puff-puff in her hand, as street boys laughed around her. Her face, unmistakable, was frozen mid-bite. Adaora's sharp intake of breath echoed through the room. Obina leaned forward, his face hardening with every passing second. He could almost hear the empire shaking beneath his feet. "This is what happens," Adaora hissed, slamming the tablet shut. "When you let her believe she is more than her name." Obina closed his eyes briefly, forcing calm. He had spent decades constructing an image of power, discipline, and perfection. Now, one careless act by his daughter threatened to reduce it to ash. The foreign investors, already cautious of Nigerian instability, would surely pull out at the first scent of scandal. Billions were at stake. His legacy, his future, his family's place at the top of Africa's hierarchy. Everything hung on his ability to contain this chaos. And then there was Ekene. From the corner of the room, Obina's only son lounged carelessly in a velvet chair, swirling a glass of wine he hadn't earned. His lips twitched with amusement as he watched his parents rage. "She's trending already," Ekene murmured, his voice laced with quiet glee. "#1 on social media. The Puff Puff Princess. That's what they're calling her." Adaora's eyes flashed. "Show some respect." But Ekene only smirked. He had lived in Amara's shadow all his life. Though he bore the Chukwuemeka name, the empire had always been tied to her brilliance, her image, her destiny. Now, for the first time, he saw her stumble. And in her stumble, he tasted freedom. Obina rose to his feet, his voice carrying the weight of command that had built skyscrapers and crushed rivals. "Enough!" he thundered. The walls seemed to vibrate with the force of his anger. "Wherever she is, whatever madness she thinks she is chasing, she must return before that merger is signed. I don't care how. I don't care what it costs. Amara comes home." His words echoed into the cavernous silence of the mansion. Adaora's lips pressed into a thin, cold smile. The staff shrank back into the shadows. Ekene sipped his wine, hiding his satisfaction. But above them all, the chandeliers glittered like mocking stars, illuminating a truth none of them wished to admit. The empire they guarded so fiercely had begun to tremble, and the heiress they depended on had slipped beyond their grasp. Chief Obina's vow thundered into the night. Amara must return before the merger, or everything they had built would collapse. The next morning found Amara far from the mirrored walls of her penthouse, seated on the back of a Kiki Napep as it rattled down the uneven streets of Surulere. The sunlight was harsh, the air heavy with dust and diesel. But for the first time in years, she felt the thrill of being unseen. To the world, she was Amara Chukwuemeka, the billionaire's daughter. But here, with her shawl wrapped around her hair, and her face bare of luxury, she was just Amma, a woman chasing something she could not yet name. Beside her sat Tunde Olawale, his backpack resting on his knees, his eyes alive with thought. Unlike most men she had known, his conversations did not circle around wealth, cars, or influence. His mind burned with ideas, with the possibilities of reshaping life for ordinary Nigerians. As the Kiki screeched to a halt, Tunde motioned for her to follow him. They walked through a busy neighborhood where generator fumes filled the air, and the constant hum of engines sang the anthem of survival. He led her into a modest room above a mechanic workshop. Inside, wires crisscrossed the walls, battery packs hummed softly, and on a makeshift table stood a collection of circuit boards, solar cells, and a battered laptop covered in stickers. "This," Tunde said, his voice tinged with pride, "is my laboratory." Amara looked around in awe. It was nothing like the futuristic labs her father funded, with polished glass walls and imported equipment. But there was a rawness here, a hunger that made it feel alive. "What exactly are you building?" she asked. Tunde's eyes brightened. He picked up a small device the size of a shoebox. "Nigeria runs on noise," he said, gesturing toward the endless hum of generators outside. "Every night, families breathe in fumes because they have no choice. But this," he tapped the device gently, "this is an AI-driven energy system. It learns a household's patterns and conserves energy, switching between solar and stored power without wasting a drop. No generator, no blackout, no poison in the air. Imagine Lagos without the sound of generators." Amara's lips parted slightly. She had grown up with noise-canceling glass walls, so she never heard the endless drone that swallowed ordinary nights. But now, standing here, she could picture it. A Lagos where light came without smoke, where silence meant peace instead of darkness. "You want to give this to everyone?" she asked softly. "Not just give," Tunde replied. "I want to build an innovation hub where ideas like this don't die in the dark. A place where kids in Ajagunle or Aba can dream in code, build in metal, and see their inventions change lives." His voice carried conviction, the kind Amara had only ever heard in boardrooms when men spoke about profits. But this was different. This was conviction born from sacrifice. For the first time in her life, Amara felt small. Not because she lacked wealth, but because she had never thought of it this way. Her empire revolved around luxury fashion infused with digital glam, clothes for the few who could afford them. But here was a man building something that could touch millions, starting from nothing. Her disguise as Amma allowed her to listen without judgment, without the weight of her family's name. And listening, she felt something stir in her chest, a mixture of admiration and something warmer, softer, something that scared her. Tunde closed his laptop and stretched. "You hungry?" he asked. Minutes later, they were seated at a buka, a small roadside restaurant with wooden benches and the smell of egusi soup thick in the air. Amara wrinkled her nose at the smoke-stained walls, but forced herself to sit. A woman placed steaming bowls of egusi and amala before them. Tunde tore into his portion eagerly, while Amara hesitated, her spoon hovering. "You're not going to eat?" he teased. She took a cautious bite. The spicy, earthy flavor exploded on her tongue, nothing like the polished gourmet meals she was used to. She coughed, then laughed, surprising even herself. Tunde laughed with her, and for a fleeting moment, it felt like they had known each other for years. "This is different," she said between bites. "Different is good," Tunde replied, smiling. As the afternoon stretched into evening, they talked about everything. Her supposed job in fashion, his battles with investors who dismissed his ideas, the loneliness of chasing dreams in a world obsessed with shortcuts. Amara found herself opening up more than she had with anyone. She spoke of feeling trapped in luxury, of the weight of expectations, of the emptiness that wealth could never fill. Under the glow of dim solar lamps, their laughter softened into silences that carried meaning. Amara caught herself studying the curve of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes, the way his passion lit his words. Something inside her shifted, a spark, fragile but undeniable. And then the spell broke. Tunde's battered laptop buzzed with a notification. He flipped it open casually, only for his face to harden. A viral blog article filled the screen, its headline screaming across the page. Heiress Amara Chukwuemeka, spotted in Surulere, living like a commoner. Her photograph was there, eating puff puff, wearing slippers, laughing beside him. The room went silent. Amara's breath caught in her throat. Tunde turned to her slowly, his expression unreadable, the weight of truth pressing down between them. In one moment, her secret world as Amma crumbled, and her real identity stood exposed before him. Lagos Island towered like a fortress of ambition, glass and steel reflecting the restless lagoon below. At the very top of its tallest tower, the executive boardroom of Chukwuemeka Technologies pulsed with unease. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline like a painting. Victoria Island's glittering offices, the endless stream of headlights threading through Echo Bridge, the restless sea in the distance. Yet inside the room, silence burned hotter than the tropical heat. Chief Obinna Chukwuemeka sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, his sharp suit immaculate, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. Around him, a half-dozen foreign investors shifted in their leather chairs, murmuring in clipped accents. They weren't interested in Lagos sunsets or Nigerian resilience. They were interested in stability. And tonight, Obinna's family no longer represented it. One of the investors, a sharp-featured man from Zurich, cleared his throat. Chief Chukwuemeka, we value this merger. But the headlines, your daughter's behavior, this kind of scandal shakes confidence. The European markets are sensitive. They read weakness in such stories. Obinna's jaw tightened. He hated the word weakness, a word he had buried with decades of dominance, a word his empire had erased from his name. But now, because of Amara, it slithered back into the room, taunting him. As he prepared to respond, the boardroom doors swung open. Striding in with the confidence of a woman who had never bowed to anyone was Ngozi Ezenwa, the oil tech magnate whose fortune was built on pipelines, refineries, and cunning alliances. She wasn't officially invited, but in Lagos high society, walls were porous to those who knew how to push. "Gentlemen," she said smoothly, her voice dripping with irony. "I couldn't help but overhear the whispers. Obinna's empire is still strong, or so he wants you to believe." The investors stiffened. Obinna's eyes flashed. "Ngozi, this is not your boardroom." She smiled thinly, her silk wrapper swaying as she took a seat at the far end of the table. "No, it isn't. But when your daughter is photographed eating puff-puff in Surulere, while your empire dangles on the edge of scandal, it becomes everyone's boardroom." Her words landed like poison. She leaned forward, lowering her voice, but loud enough to echo. "The world thinks your heiress is running wild. What message does that send? That you cannot control your family? If you cannot control your family, how will you control a global merger?" The investors exchanged glances. The trap had been set. Obinna's knuckles whitened as he gripped the table. He wanted to roar, to remind them all that he was still the man who built skyscrapers from dust, who turned Naira into empires. But rage was weakness here, and weakness was death. So he swallowed it, his silence louder than fury. From her seat, Adaora finally spoke, her tone smooth, but her words cold. "Then we will give them control. If Amara will not return willingly, we will anchor her to the empire, arrange her engagement to Ikenna Ezenwa, Ngozi's son, tie her image to power, and no one will dare question the family again." Ngozi's lips curved into a predator's smile. "At last, Adaora, you speak with wisdom." Obinna's eyes narrowed at his wife. He saw in her suggestion both strategy and betrayal. Was this truly about saving face, or about binding the family to Ngozi's power? He could not tell. While giants sparred in the boardroom, another shadow moved quietly in the background. Ekene, his son, had excused himself earlier from the meeting. Now, in the dim corridors of the tower, he sat across from Ngozi's assistant in a side office. Documents shifted hands. His voice was low but eager. "My father doesn't see me," Ekene whispered. "He sees only Amara. But I can help you. I can tell you what the board doesn't know. In return, I want my place." His betrayal was smooth, his smile sharp, and with each word, the empire bled quietly from within. Back in the boardroom, the investors had grown restless. "Chief Chukwuemeka," the Zurich man said, "the deal is delayed until confidence is restored." The words hit Obina like steel. Delayed meant threatened. Threatened meant broken. His empire was slipping through his fingers, and the world was watching. The press was already merciless. Tabloids painted Amara as a spoiled heiress gone rogue, laughing in Surulere while the empire shook. Social media turned her into memes, the puff-puff in her hand, more damaging than any financial crisis. The laughter of strangers had become the noose around his legacy. Obina exhaled slowly. Enough of patience. Enough of whispers. "Find her," he ordered, his voice slicing the tension. "Track her, follow her. Wherever she goes, I want eyes on her." Later that night, in a control room hidden deep within the tower, silent trackers came alive. Tiny drones lifted into the sky, whirring like mechanical insects, invisible to the naked eye. Their cameras scanned neighborhoods, alleys, and markets, searching for the heiress who had wandered off her path. And then, success. The screen flickered to life. The drone camera zoomed in. There she was, Amara Chukwuemeka. No disguise this time, no hiding. She was walking down a crowded street in Surulere, hand in hand with Tunde Olawale, their heads bent close in quiet laughter. Obina's chest tightened as he watched. It was not just her absence that threatened him anymore. It was her choice. The empire had eyes on her now, and in her hands she held the power to either destroy it or redefine it. The night air was heavy, charged with the kind of silence that carries too many unspoken truths. Amara sat on the edge of Tunde's cluttered workshop table, her shawl slipping from her shoulders. Tunde stood across from her, his arms folded, his eyes dark with suspicion. Between them, the glow of his laptop still displayed the headline that had shattered the disguise she had so carefully woven. Amara Chukwuemeka, the billionaire heiress, living a double life. He broke the silence first. "So it's true." His voice was low, almost too calm. "You lied to me." Amara's throat tightened. "I didn't lie. You told me your name was Amma. You let me believe you were one of us, just another face in the crowd. But all along, you were her, the face on the billboards, the untouchable princess." His words carried more hurt than anger, and that hurt cut deeper. She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. "Do you think it was easy for me to hide? Do you know what it feels like to live inside a cage made of diamonds? Every move I make, every smile I wear, every word I speak, it's all watched, judged, owned by my father's empire. I wanted, just for once, to breathe. That train was the only way I could escape." Tunde turned away, pacing the small room. His hand dragged through his hair, frustration dripping from his every movement. "Do you know what you've done? If they see me with you, your family, the press, your father, do you understand what that means for me? For my work?" She stood, her voice trembling, but strong. "I understand. And I'm sorry. But when I am with you, I am not the heiress. I am not the empire. I am just me. Isn't that what matters?" The tension between them thickened, anger colliding with something softer, something they both tried to resist. His eyes lingered on hers, searching, questioning. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to push her away. Both desires wrestled inside him, and for a moment, silence stretched until it nearly broke them apart. Finally, he exhaled, his voice quieter. "You could have trusted me." "And risked losing this before it even began," she whispered. The room softened. The distance between them closed by a step, then another. And though the wounds of truth remained raw, something deeper flickered between their broken words. Understanding. "Come with me," Tunde said suddenly. He led her through the winding streets until they reached an abandoned railway yard. The moonlight cast silver shadows across rusted tracks and broken train carriages, relics of journeys long forgotten. Amid the silence, Tunde pulled a sketchpad from his bag. Kneeling on the cracked concrete, he began to draw. "This is what I see," he said, his voice carrying conviction again. "Homes rising where others see ruins. Eco-homes built from recycled steel and solar grids. Affordable, beautiful, alive. Imagine a Lagos where even the poor can wake up in smart homes powered by the sun." Amara knelt beside him, her eyes tracing the lines of his vision. In his sketches, she saw not just buildings, but hope carved into walls and rooftops. Her fingers brushed the page, lingering over the outlines of futuristic windows. "What if my fashion empire could join this?" she murmured. "What if we designed homes where luxury wasn't just for the rich, where style met purpose, and people felt like kings and queens even in modest houses?" He looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't see a billionaire's daughter. He saw a woman daring to dream with him. Their laughter broke softly through the night as they imagined cities rising from ashes, communities transformed by innovation and beauty. And then, without warning, the laughter faded into silence. Their eyes locked. The city hummed in the distance, the world spinning beyond them. But in that moment, nothing mattered but the closeness they shared. Tunde's hand lifted, hesitated, then cupped her cheek. Amara leaned in, her breath catching, and under the vast Lagos sky, they shared a stolen kiss, gentle at first, then urgent, as though it might be the only one they would ever have. When they pulled apart, Amara's voice broke into a whisper. "I've never felt alive until now." For a heartbeat, it felt as if the world had shifted, as if they had carved out a secret universe where their love and their dreams could coexist. For a heartbeat, the heiress and the innovator belonged to no one but each other. But reality was never far. As they walked back toward the edge of the railway yard, Amara froze. Parked at the corner of the station was a sleek black Rolls-Royce, its tinted windows glinting under the moonlight. The air around it was too still, too watchful. Her pulse quickened. Tunde followed her gaze, his jaw tightening. The luxury car did not belong here, not in this forgotten yard of rust and ruin. The door creaked open, and two men in sharp suits stepped out, their expressions hard, their movements deliberate. Amara's breath hitched. She knew before she even heard the words in her mind. Her father had found her. The Empire's shadow had arrived at her doorstep, and escape was no longer hers to control. The Rolls-Royce cut through the night like a predator, returning home with prey. Amara sat between two silent men in suits, her shawl wrapped tightly around her, her heart drumming in her chest. Lagos blurred outside the tinted windows, the smoky bukas, the chaotic danfos, the resilience of Surulere fading into the distance. And then, like stepping into another universe, the car crossed the gates of Banana Island. The Chukwuemeka mansion loomed ahead, glass walls, marble columns, fountains lit in gold. To the world, it was a symbol of triumph. To Amara, it had become a prison. When the doors opened, her father, Chief Amara Chukwuemeka, stood waiting at the top of the steps, not with relief, not with embrace. His arms were folded, his face a mask of fury. "You dare disappear," he thundered, his voice echoing across the marble courtyard, "while I negotiate with men who measure me by discipline? You dare humiliate this family for the world to laugh at?" Amara's lips trembled. She wanted to speak of loneliness, of suffocation, of the joy she had tasted outside these golden walls. But her words would be dismissed before they even formed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry does not sign billionaire deals," Obina roared. "Your recklessness cost me leverage, investors question my stability, and now," he jabbed a finger toward her, "you will fix it." Inside the mansion, her mother Adaora awaited, Dressed in flowing velvet, diamonds heavy on her wrist, she sat like a queen on her throne. Her expression was sharper than her husband's rage. "You will be engaged to Ekena Ezenwa," Adaora said coolly, "the son of Ngozi. It is the only way to stabilize what you nearly destroyed. Your face, your name, tied to their empire, will silence every whisper." Amara froze. "Engaged? Without my choice?" Adaora's eyes narrowed. "Choice is for children. You are a Chukwuemeka. Your duty is to power, not to love." The words stabbed deep. That night, Amara was locked in the comfort the world envied. The chandeliers glowed, the infinity pool sparkled, the imported roses filled the halls with fragrance. Yet to her, it was suffocating. The walls closed in, each luxury an iron bar on her invisible cage. Alone in her room, she pulled out a hidden sketchbook. On its pages, she drew Tunde's eco-homes from memory: slanted rooftops, solar grids, gardens woven into walls. Each stroke of pencil was rebellion, a refusal to let go of the vision she had tasted in the forgotten railway yard. Her brother Ikani knocked on her door the next morning, his smirk already in place. "So, the great heiress returns," he drawled. "Only now, you're locked up like a bird. Tell me, Amara, how did the puff-puff taste? Sweet? Sweeter than your fall from grace?" His laughter cut her deeper than her father's anger. He had always envied her position as heir. Now, he savored her disgrace, like wine. She said nothing. Silence was her only weapon left. Days passed. The mansion fed her, clothed her, sheltered her in silk and glass. But her heart ached for Surulere's noise, for smoky suya, and generator hums, for the rooftop view where Lagos glowed in two colors of truth. In those streets, she had felt alive. Here, she felt embalmed in wealth. At dinner one evening, the family gathered around a table that stretched longer than most streets. Silverware glistened, waiters stood at attention, and courses were served with mechanical precision. Yet the atmosphere was poisoned with tension. Obinna placed his wineglass down heavily. His voice, cold and final, filled the hall. "Amara," he said, "remember this. You belong to power, not to love. Forget this, boy. Forget the streets. Your life is this empire, and this empire alone." The words silenced even the air. Amara's fingers curled against her lap, but she forced her face into stillness. She would not give them the satisfaction of her tears. Later, retreating to her balcony, she let the night breeze wash against her skin. The city stretched in the distance, alive with neon and chaos. She closed her eyes, aching for the sound of Tunde's voice, the spark of his laughter. When she opened them again, her breath caught. Across the skyline, a massive holographic billboard flickered to life. And there he was, Tunde Olawale. His face projected above the city, his voice amplified as he pitched his AI-driven energy invention to a crowd of potential investors. Her heart leapt. He hadn't given up. The empire might have locked her in. But beyond these walls, his dream still burned. And somehow, she knew. It was also her dream now. On the balcony of her golden cage, Amara watched Tunde's light spread across Lagos, knowing her heart could not stay locked behind glass forever. From her balcony of glass and gold, Amara watched Lagos inhale him. Tunde's face stretched across digital billboards, like a promise the city had been waiting for. Eyes bright, voice steady, hands sketching light from the air as he described homes that learned, streets that breathed, nights unbroken by generator smoke. The feed bounced from Eco-Atlantic to Falomo, from Lekki Phase 1 to Marina, a constellation of screens stitching his dream across the skyline. She pressed a palm to the window, whispering, "Shine." But shine meets shadow, where power feels threatened. Midway through his pitch, subtle disruptions crawled into the stream. A clipped mic, a stuttering frame, a sudden lull in the crowd as whispers traveled faster than the wind. Amara recognized the pattern. She'd seen it orchestrated from dinner tables where deals were plated beside caviar. Investors ghosted his inbox. Facilities lost their bookings. A logistics partner Misplaced solar panels overnight. It was too neat, too efficient. It had her father's fingerprints, invisible and undeniable. On the largest screen above Ozumba Mbadiwe, Tunde pushed through the interference, jaw set, refusing to flinch. "Silence has cost us too much," he said. "We will power our own future." Amara felt pride bloom like sunrise, and rage tighten around it like wire. She pictured Obinna in his office, watching the city receive a dream that did not carry his signature, and she understood the violence of what he feared, a story he couldn't control. That night, the mansion hushed itself, pretending to sleep. Amara did not. Under a wash of cool lamplight, she opened the vault of her second life. Encrypted wallets, shell accounts, production ledgers, and a slender string of admin keys she had built for emergencies no one thought she'd face. The fashion tech company credited her as muse. The code credited her as architect. Her fingers flew, dismantling the velvet of her inheritance stitch by stitch, rerouting liquidity through legal corridors that bent like rivers. Traceable with effort, survivable with courage. Numbers moved, alarms stayed quiet. She exhaled. The first transfer cleared, a bold, blazing vein. Then another, smaller but smarter, seeded for longevity. Millions redirected to a foundation she named out loud so she could hear it belong to her. The Quiet Light Fund. Its charter was spare and mercilessly clear. Back African innovation that gentles the night and widens the morning. Signatories, just her. Accountability, absolute. For the first time, the ledger of her life wrote a sentence without asking permission. At dawn, Lagos rinsed itself awake. Amara stepped into a dark hoodie, pressed a plain cap low, hid her face behind market sunglasses, and slipped past the yawning gates. No chauffeur, no convoy. The Danfo that greeted her was dented, alive, and perfect. She climbed aboard, handed over crumpled notes, and let the bus carry her like any other heart beating towards something it could finally name. When she reached the workshop rooftop, the city welcomed her with a warm, unruly wind. Tunde turned at the sound of her footsteps. Surprise flared, then softened into that wary tenderness he wore like armor. She removed the glasses, and the world fell away. "I believe in you," she said simply, and placed the first quiet light disbursement on his table. A contract, a roadmap, a runway. Not a rescue, a partnership. He read it, once, twice, tracing the clauses that protected his IP, the milestones tied to community ownership, the clause that returned governing rights to neighborhoods when thresholds were met. "You built this?" he asked, almost laughing. "You," and here his voice broke, "saw me." They worked until noon devoured the shadows. He showed her modular facades, whose textures echoed Aso Oke and Adair, without stealing from artisans. She sketched marketplaces, braided into courtyards, co-ops nested above microgrids, childcare creches lined with story walls that taught energy literacy through murals and games. They argued and invented and surrendered and dared. Tech villages, she said, powered by culture. Culture, he answered, powered by care. When hunger finally found them, they shared jollof from a plastic bowl, steam curling like prayer. He wiped pepper from her lip with his thumb, then froze, as if he had crossed a border he couldn't redraw. "Don't stop," she whispered. He didn't. The kiss tasted like cinnamon heat and clean danger, like two futures learning to breathe together. Around them, Lagos hummed its complicated lullaby. Okadas whining, sellers bargaining, a choir rehearsing somewhere below where a window caught the sun and threw it back in praise. After, they lay side by side beneath a canopy of patched tarpaulin, mapping a city that might deserve them. "I used to think my life was a showroom," Amara said. "Now I want it to be a workshop." Tunde laughed softly. "Workshops are messy." She turned to him. "So are real lives." Beneath their banter, a vow braided itself. Unwritten, unbreakable. Build what money alone could not buy. Evening crept in wearing orange. She returned to Banana Island as the sky gentled, slipped past the manicured hedges, and carried the secret of her new constellation inside her chest. But empires are trained to smell smoke. In the study, Adaora stood at the console, the house lights throwing cold halos across polished wood. On screen, line items blinked like sirens. Transfers signed by an admin key she recognized, authorized by a daughter she had curated for spectacle, not insurrection. Her hands were steady. Her voice was winter. "You moved the money." Amara held her mother's gaze. "I moved my life." Adaora's smile did not reach her eyes. "Then you have chosen." Across the screen, the missing millions glowed like a confession, proof that Amara had bet everything on love and a future beyond the empire. The night sky above Echo Atlantic City glittered with lights, a man-made peninsula rising like a jewel against the Atlantic. For one evening, its towers and promenades transformed into the stage for Nigeria's most dazzling gala, a gathering of billionaires, foreign investors, tycoons, celebrities, and power brokers. Cameras flashed endlessly, luxury cars lined the entrance, and the air pulsed with the weight of money and ambition. At the center of it all stood Amara Chukwuemeka, draped in a gown spun from silver fabric that shimmered with embedded LED designs, glowing as she moved like a living constellation. The world saw her as the perfect daughter, poised, elegant, untouchable. Her smile was measured, her posture flawless, her every step rehearsed under the watchful eyes of her father. But behind the flawless mask, her heart beat wildly, because she knew what this night was meant to be. The gala wasn't merely a celebration, it was a spectacle. Chief Obinna Chukwuemeka had orchestrated it to erase scandal, to reassert control, to bind his daughter's name to power again. And the final act would be her engagement to Ikenna Ezenwa, the son of Ngozi, sealing an alliance that would quiet the investors, bury the headlines, and restore the empire's image. As guests mingled beneath chandeliers made from crystal imported from Paris, Amara moved like a mannequin among them, her mind elsewhere. For at the far end of the hall, hidden in the shadows, she had spotted him, Tunde Olawale. He stood apart from the glitter, dressed in a simple black suit borrowed for the occasion, his eyes locked on hers. He wasn't supposed to be there. But somehow, he had slipped past the gates of privilege and planted himself in the one place that gave her courage. She breathed, "Hold me steady," though he couldn't hear her. The evening reached its crescendo when Obinna took the stage. His presence silenced the room. Behind him, screens flashed the Chukwuemeka crest, the promise of empire. He raised a glass, his deep voice carrying like thunder. "Tonight, we celebrate not just wealth, but legacy. In times of doubt, a family proves its strength. And tonight, my daughter Amara will show the world that strength." Gasps rippled through the crowd as Ikenna stepped forward, tall, confident, a polished smile gleaming. He held out a ring box, a diamond large enough to buy a city block. The camera swiveled, flashes like lightning. Obinna's face glowed with triumph. Amara's fingers trembled as Ikenna reached for her hand. She heard the whispers already. "This is duty. This is strategy. This is power." Her mother's eyes drilled into her, cold and commanding. Her father's stare demanded obedience. The empire waited, but her heart refused. In one swift motion, Amara pulled her hand back. The gasp that tore through the hall was louder than thunder. The investors froze, the celebrities gawked, the tycoons murmured into their glasses. "No," she said, her voice ringing clear. She turned to the crowd, her face no longer a mask, but a storm of truth. "I will not marry for power. I will not be used to polish an empire. I choose love. I choose purpose." Silence fractured into chaos. Phones flew into the air, live streams igniting across Lagos, New York, Dubai. Hashtags exploded in seconds. Amara speaks, Daswash, love over empire. Yash, puff, puff, princess, rebels. The entire nation watched as the heiress shattered her gilded chains in real time. Obinna's face burned crimson, humiliation slicing deeper than any corporate defeat. Adaura's hand flew to her chest, her eyes widening in horror. Ikenna's smile curdled into rage as murmurs filled the room. And then, Like a flame breaking through smoke, Tundi emerged from the crowd. He crossed the marble floor, his gaze steady, and stood beside Amara. Without hesitation, he reached for her hand. The gesture was simple, but in that moment, it was an earthquake. Billionaire sons had offered her the world, yet she chose to stand with the boy who carried dreams in a backpack. Cameras captured it, beams of light immortalizing rebellion. Together, they faced the hall. Together, they declared a love and a vision no amount of wealth could erase. The silence that followed was shattered only by Obina's voice, cold, sharp, final. "From this day," he said, each word like a blade, "you are no longer my daughter." The room gasped again, but this time no one dared speak. Adaora shut her eyes, Akane smirked in the shadows, and Amara stood tall, despite the weight of the sentence that severed her from everything she had ever known. Yet as Tunde's fingers tightened around hers, she realized something her father could never understand. Losing the empire was not her death. It was her birth. Disowned in public, Amara stood in the ruins of her old life, yet in the blaze of her new one. The night after the gala, Lagos roared with scandal. Screens lit up with Amara's defiance replayed on loop. Her rejection of Ikenna, her declaration of love, Tunde's hand in hers, and finally, Obina's thunderous disownment. She had been cut off in front of the world. The empire no longer carried her name, and so, Amara Chukwuemeka, the girl who had grown up in glass towers, moved into a place the world would have once laughed at. Tunde's rooftop flat stood above a noisy mechanic workshop in Surulere. The zinc roof rattled when rain fell. The bathroom was shared with two other tenants downstairs, and the kitchen was little more than a gas burner balanced on a wooden table. Yet, for Amara, every corner of that space breathed a freedom she had never tasted. Her first morning there, she woke not to the hum of central air conditioning, but to the chorus of roosters, car horns, and children shouting in the alley. The sheets were plain, the mattress firm, the fan slow and noisy. But when she stepped outside and fetched water in a plastic bucket from the communal tap, neighbors smiled at her without bowing or whispering. She was no longer a princess. She was simply Amma, carrying her bucket like everyone else. In the evenings, she stood beside Tunde at the gas burner, learning to stir egusi soup with bare hands, reddened by heat. They ate from one plate, laughing when she struggled to cut meat without gold-handled knives. Scarcity became their teacher, love their shield. "This life is hard," she admitted one night, her hair tied back, sweat on her brow. Tunde touched her cheek gently. "But it's real, and you're stronger than you ever knew." Their love deepened in this furnace of simplicity, tested not by excess, but by lack. And from that lack, they built something greater than either had dreamed. Amara still held fragments of her independence, small hidden reserves she had saved before her family froze her accounts. She poured those resources quietly into Tunde's innovation hub, renting a larger workshop, hiring young engineers, and supplying materials his dreams had long demanded. Together, they sketched the blueprint for Nigeria's first AI-powered eco-city prototype. It was not a fantasy of glass towers and luxury skyscrapers. It was a city that breathed with its people, modular homes with solar rooftops that shifted like flowers toward the sun, communal gardens feeding neighborhoods, water harvested from the air itself, street lamps that brightened as footsteps approached, microgrids that learned from patterns of use, conserving energy for when the city needed it most. A future built not for the rich, but for everyone. Amara brought her flair for design into the vision, infusing culture into architecture, facades patterned with a deer prints, courtyards shaped like ancestral compounds, technology woven into heritage rather than replacing it. Tunde provided the backbone, the algorithms, the energy systems. Together, they crafted a dream bold enough to rival empires. The city whispered about her. Gossip blogs mocked her fall from grace, posting side-by-side photos of the heiress who once wore diamond-studded gowns, now carrying buckets of water and slippers. Memes named her Surulere's Puff Puff Queen. The elite snickered. But the youth, the restless millions who had grown up in crowded streets and smoky nights, saw her differently. To them, she was no longer just Amara the heiress. She was a rebel, a symbol that even the gilded could choose grit, that wealth could be abandoned for something greater. They reposted her defiance, shared her laughter in Surulere, and carried her story like a torch. At the hub, young interns gathered, drawn to her presence. She mentored them with fire, speaking of courage, of choosing purpose over approval. For the first time, Amara did not feel like a mannequin of privilege. She felt like a builder. As momentum grew, corporate giants circled like vultures. Multinationals offered Tunde buyouts in glossy boardrooms. Millions of dollars to sign away his invention. He refused each one. "We are not selling survival," he told them. "We are building it." One night, after rejecting another lucrative offer, he and Amara sat on the rooftop under a sky scattered with stars. "You gave up an empire," Tunde said softly. "No," she replied, taking his hand. "I gave up a prison. This is my freedom." Their laughter rose above the hum of Lagos, carried by the wind. But the wind carried other news too. Far away in the tower Obina once ruled like a kingdom, the empire groaned. Foreign investors were withdrawing one by one, whispers of distrust multiplying. The scandal of Amara's rebellion had planted seeds of doubt too deep to ignore. Stock values trembled, partnerships faltered, and competitors circled like sharks. The news broke in whispers first, then headlines: Chukwuemeka Technologies facing investor exodus. And as Amara leaned against Tunde's shoulder that night, basking in her exile, she did not yet know the empire she had abandoned was beginning to collapse under its own weight. Obina's fortress of glass was cracking, and the fall had only just begun. The skyscraper that once stood as Chief Amara Chukwuemeka's crown jewel now felt like a mausoleum. Glass walls stretched across the Lagos skyline, reflecting a city that no longer bowed to his name. The corridors, once bustling with investors and aides, echoed with silence, broken only by the shuffle of nervous staff. His empire, built on precision, discipline, and sheer dominance, was unraveling before his eyes. The betrayal came not from strangers, but from blood. Ekene, his only son, had finally stepped out from Amara's shadow. In secret meetings with Ngozi Ezenwa, Ekene handed over confidential files, exposing weaknesses Obina had worked years to hide. With that information, Ngozi spread a narrative of rot within the empire. "The Chukwuemeka fortress," she whispered to global investors, "is built on cracks." And they believed her. Foreign investors, already skittish after Amara's rebellion, began to pull out. First Zurich, then Dubai, then Cape Town. Stock tickers that once glowed green bled red. Media headlines no longer praised Obina as Nigeria's visionary giant. Instead, they splashed his name across covers with words like disgraced, outmaneuvered, finished. In the boardroom where he once reigned supreme, Obina sat alone, his hands pressed against his temples. The city lights glittered beyond the glass, mocking him. For the first time in decades, silence filled him, not strategy. He thought of Amara, the daughter he had raised like a soldier, polished into perfection, caged in gold. The daughter he had disowned, not with hesitation, but with finality. And now she was gone from him, yet everywhere else, louder, brighter, stronger. Adayora entered, quietly, her steps graceful, but her face hardened by disillusion. She studied her husband, this man who had once seemed unshakable, now bent beneath invisible weight. "Look at what your pride has done," she said softly, but each word stung. "You lost your daughter, and now you are losing your empire." Obina lifted his head, his voice hoarse. "I built all this for her, for them," and she spat on it. "No," Adaora countered, her tone sharpening. "You built this for yourself. You never saw her heart, only her utility. You caged her and called it protection. You disowned her and called it strength. And now you sit here with nothing but glass walls." Her words sliced him deeper than any headline. While his world collapsed, Amara's bloomed. Across the city, the eco-hub she and Tunde launched pulsed with life. The prototype of Nigeria's first AI-powered eco-city had drawn global attention. Journalists from London and New York flew in to document the miracle rising in Surulere. Investors who had abandoned Obina now flocked to Tunde and Amara, not for legacy, but for vision. The press, once merciless, shifted its narrative. Headlines transformed overnight. From heiress gone rogue to visionary rebel. The puff-puff princess who redefined power. Amara Chukwuemeka builds future beyond billionaire legacy. Lagos youth rallied to her side. They wore shirts with her quotes, chanted her name at rallies, shared her defiance as memes of hope. For the young and disillusioned, she became proof that wealth could be abandoned for purpose, that rebellion could birth creation. On one humid evening, Obina sat alone in his office, scrolling through a live stream on his tablet. His daughter appeared on the screen, standing tall before a crowd of eager youths in Surulere. The backdrop was not marble or chandeliers, but murals and solar panels, the skeleton of the eco-city rising behind her. Amara's voice was steady, her eyes alight with conviction. This is not just about technology. It is about dignity. It is about rewriting what it means to live in Nigeria. We will not beg for light. We will create it. We will not inherit broken systems. We will rebuild them. The crowd erupted in cheers, chanting her name. Obina's chest tightened as he watched. His daughter, whom he thought he had destroyed with exile, was more alive than ever. Tears pricked his eyes, and for the first time, he did not resist them. He wept silently, not just for what he had lost, but for the possibility that perhaps he had been wrong all along. Adaora entered, pausing at the sight of him hunched over, tears streaking down his face. But she did not mock him. She only sighed, her own eyes softening. She is more like you than you think. Only she has chosen a different empire. Obina closed his eyes. He had spent his life wielding power like a weapon, and now, stripped of control, he felt something he had never allowed himself to feel: humility. He set the tablet down, staring at his reflection in the glass wall. An old man, a broken king, a father without his crown. But inside the reflection, in the streaming video of his daughter's voice, he found a sliver of something he thought long dead: hope. Slowly, he rose from his chair. His decision was heavy, but certain. He would see her again. Not as the father who commanded her, not as the empire that tried to own her, but as a man stripped bare, seeking redemption from the only person who still carried his name with honor. Chief Obina stepped into the night, resolved. The next time he faced Amara, it would not be as a master, but as a man begging for forgiveness. The morning sun spilled gold across Lagos, brighter than it had in years, as if the city itself knew something new was being born. In the heart of Surulere, a space once dismissed as a forgotten patch of land, now stood transformed. The banners read, "Launch of Nigeria's first eco-smart district." Crowds gathered, students, artisans, engineers, young dreamers in t-shirts, alongside dignitaries in agbadas, and foreign investors in sharp suits. Drones hovered above, capturing every angle of the day that would etch itself into history. At the center of the stage stood Amara Chukwuemeka and Tunde Olawale, no longer rebels hiding from power, but visionaries standing before it. Behind them rose the first completed structures of their dream: solar-paneled homes patterned with Adair motifs, smart street lamps glowing with kinetic energy, community gardens sprouting with vegetables, and water towers pulling drinkable drops straight from humid air. The eco-city pulsed with vibrance, heritage braided seamlessly into technology. Investors had flown in from Dubai, New York, Cape Town. Some wore disbelief on their faces, others curiosity, but all felt the pull of something greater than profit, a glimpse of Africa rewriting its own narrative. The drums began first, talking drums echoing rhythms that called both ancestors and descendants. Then came the chants, the ululations, the dances of masquerades moving side by side with projections of holographic art. Lagos was alive in a way no gala, no skyscraper, no boardroom could ever contain. Amara stepped forward. She wore no diamond crown, no silk imported from Europe. Instead, she wore a flowing gown made from local fabric, woven with solar thread embroidery that glowed like fireflies as she moved. The microphone trembled in her hand for a second, but when she looked at Tunde, his eyes steady, her voice found its ground. "Wealth means nothing without purpose," she declared, her voice carrying across the square. "And love means nothing without courage. I was born into gold walls, but they caged me. I boarded a train I was never meant to take, and for the first time I found life outside the glass towers. I found love, I found meaning, and today I stand not as the heiress of a name, but as a builder of futures. This district is proof that Nigeria can power itself, house itself, dream for itself." The crowd roared, a thunder of applause mixed with tears, laughter, and chants of her name. Somewhere at the back, half hidden in the shadows of the pavilion, Amara Chukwuemeka stood. No entourage, no spotlight. His once impeccable suit hung a little loose, his hair streaked with the stress of battles lost. But his eyes held something different now. They were no longer sharp with command, but softened by regret, by pride he could not voice. As Amara's speech ended, her gaze drifted over the crowd and landed on him. For a moment, time stilled. Father and daughter, two worlds separated by pride and pain, locked eyes across the sea of witnesses. He did not call her name. He did not ask forgiveness aloud. But he nodded, just once, firmly, like a man acknowledging defeat and blessing all at once. It was not reconciliation spoken, but it was reconciliation given. Amara's throat tightened, but she lifted her chin, tears glistening as she pressed forward. She did not run to him. She did not crumble. Instead, she reached for Tunde's hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm, steady, unshakable. Together, they lifted their joined hands for the crowd to see. Not power and wealth clasped together, but courage and love. And the city roared again. The celebrations spilled into the evening. Lanterns glowing like stars across the new eco-district, music flooding the streets, strangers dancing as one. Amara felt it in her bones. This was not just the unveiling of a district, it was the birth of a movement. Later, when the speeches and cameras faded, Amara and Tunde slipped away from the noise. They walked to the edge of the railway line that once carried her life off course. The tracks gleamed under the moonlight, and a train waited there. Not the crowded chaos of that night long ago, but a sleek new solar-powered model, part of the eco-city's transport system. Amara looked at Tunde, a smile curving her lips. "The first time I stepped on a train, I thought I had lost everything. And now," he asked gently, "now I know I found everything." Hand in hand, they boarded. Not by accident, by choice. The doors closed behind them, sealing a new chapter. As the train hummed forward, carrying them into the future they had built, a narration echoed softly across the scene, as if whispered by destiny itself. The wrong train once took her away from her world, but it delivered her to the life she was always meant to live. And with that, the story ended, not with loss, but with rebirth. The world would never see her as just an heiress again. She had become a symbol, a builder, and a woman who turned exile into freedom. If this story moved you, don't just stop here. Hit that subscribe button and join our community for more powerful tales like this one. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. What would you have done if you were in Amara's shoes? And if you enjoyed this journey, make sure to like and share so others can experience it too. Your support keeps these stories alive, and the next one will be even more unforgettable.